Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our quarterly webinar. I'm Corinne Alt, Marketing Coordinator for PolymerFilms. Thank you for joining us today. We are so excited to have Jim Pancero back to discuss how we can best communicate and connect with buyers in today's post-COVID reality. You should have received an email that includes the workbook for today's event. During the program, you may submit any questions in the chat box at any time. Jim will take a moment halfway through the presentation to answer your questions, and then once more towards the conclusion of the webinar. Today's session is being recorded, and we will email you a link of the recording later today. And now I would like to turn your attention over to Adam Klein, the General Manager of PolymerFilms West.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the PolymerFilms 5 film converting locations, we'd like to thank you for attending, and we hope this proves to be beneficial for you and for your company. And let me give you a little bit more information about Jim Pancero. He's joining us today from Dallas, Texas. Jim's proven selling philosophy and process are all just one goal: to help you increase your competitive selling advantage. With over 30 years experience successfully influencing and helping top performers such as yourself, Jim has also learned one additional and critical fact. No one except his mother is really interested in hearing any details about his personal success, background, or credentials. So please help me welcome Jim Pancero. The show is yours.
Adam, thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Excited that you're here. We have an hour, an opportunity that I'm hoping to share with you how to best communicate and connect with buyers in today's post-COVID reality, watching what's going on. If you haven't, and I'm hoping you're with us, the last time I had a chance to share was back last summer. I think it was in August of last year that we did a webinar on how to sell and gain a competitive advantage. And I believe that recording is still available. That within this, there's been so much that's been happening this last year because of the impact of COVID, that frankly, it has covered some of the natural changes or progressions in selling and in buying that's happened. So I watch a lot of people are attributing changes in selling that they believe are happening because of COVID, when I believe it's other issues, which means these are long-term changes. So how we sell to people and how we reach our customers and how we maintain our persuasiveness, how we maintain our effectiveness, are all going through some pretty dramatic changes. I'd like to share with you at least what I see. One of the things that's helped me is, as a consultant, I work in a variety of industries. Because when I start working multiple dates with a company, I will give them exclusivity in their markets. So as soon as I get established in an industry, I'm actually also locked out of it. So because of that, I think over my career, I've worked in about 80 different industries of equipment sales, traditional parts and pieces distribution, services side, even some retail. And one of the things that's helped me with that, of having that wide breadth of coverage, is I start to see, I found usually earlier than most, what trends are happening, because I see it in completely independent industries. If we see the same thing happen, it usually means it's a culture change. So I'd like to share with you what I see those changes are. My opinion, you've got to decide what fits. The other thing is, on this broadcast, for those of you listening, I'm going to assume, I'm going to make a profound assumption. Hope it doesn't offend anybody, but I'm going to assume you know how to sell. You know how to ask questions, you know how to close, you know how to qualify, you know technically how to support your customers' businesses and bring them solutions that are more advanced, that will help them improve their business, lower their risk, make their life easier, save them money. I'm assuming you know how to sell, and we're not going to talk about that. What I want to talk about is now, how do you best communicate and connect with these buyers, especially because of the realization of all the changes that are happening, and hopefully some suggestions for you. You do have a workbook of the material. I know Corinne and the team has distributed that to you. If you're watching this recording and you can't find a copy of the workbook, if you email me, jim@pancero.com, Pancero. If you email me at jim@pancero.com, I'd be very happy. We'll send you the workbook free. There's no charge, no commercial. It's a resource if you need help, because we'd like you to have this material. Because I'm also hoping that, especially if you're listening as a manager to this material, that this is material you want to take back and work your team through, either through the recording or just using the workbook. In fact, the workbook is copyrighted to try to slow you down if you want to be an outside professional trainer. It's not copyrighted to prevent you from using it. You have my permission to use it within your company any way that it'll help you and your sales team to be more effective and to have more success. I think as we go through this, and we're going to have a couple points of questions, both in the middle and towards the end. And if we don't get to your question, I'll give you my contact information at the end, and it's also on the workbook. If you call me or email me, I'd be very happy to answer any of your questions and be of any offer of assistance just in support of you attending this program today. As we start this off, I think especially now, looking that we're about 14 months through this pandemic, one of the most critical things I think we can say is, congratulations, you made it. You came out on the other side. That I think is profound. That we look now, what was fascinating is how people have been impacted and the variety of impacts we see of industries. And we're going to ask you about that in a moment. But to start this off, I thought it might help everybody, myself and you as well, to see who's on the call. So we have two polls we'd ask you to participate. They'll pop up in the center of your screen and you can enter it in and we'll show you the results, and just to see as a kind of a cross section of where everybody is. We have two polling questions. Curran, if we could do the first. Here it is. What's your job title? Who do we have on the call today? We have choices of, you could either be an owner and senior manager, a sales manager who also sells, a selling manager in effect, a salesperson, a service person, or you could be a CEO. CEO stands for children employed by owners, by the way, but you could be a CEO. Let's see how we got. Well, it looks like we're about half managers, but interesting, about 40-some%, almost half the people that are on the call are a sales manager who's also carrying territory. This is excellent. Kind of nice to see what the spread is and where people are. I think we can end that poll. Yeah, okay. I think we can close that. That looks pretty solid. Everybody gets to see the information. I love these polls that are available now on this online. And you can see the predominance is a sales manager who's also carrying territories. Call that a doing manager, where you have responsibilities for what you personally do, as well as how you coach and lead others with their processes. This is excellent. We got a second question while we're on it that I think might be interesting to really see where everybody is. And what's nice, because this is, you don't see who answered what, we can be more open. Let's see, there we go. Second polling question. How'd you do last year? What was 2020 like for you? You got choices all the way from up over 25% to down over 25%. What's it's been for you? Isn't it interesting, the people that have the sales down the most are usually the last to respond? That was a joke, sorry. Wow, this is fantastic. And it's been really fascinating to me as we look at what's happened with COVID, of how so many different industries have been so dramatically impacted. As we were starting the program, if I was joking, I showed the visual, that the background. One of my clients is the motor coach industry, the people that you would rent a bus from if you were going to a meeting and wanted to take a group of people to that meeting, working with them. And of course, you can assume their business was down over 80% because nobody was doing that kind of transportation. Other industries have been way up. I think this is spectacular. Congratulations, having such a strong year, especially because all the indications I see across all the industries, everybody is talking about now what a positive accelerating year this is going to be in 2021, because as everything is starting to recover and open up. So hopefully, as great as last year was for most of you, that's impressive to see that over half are up over 25%. That hopefully this can continue and have an even stronger year this year. Thank you, Curran and the team, for doing that, for showing that. Let's talk about what's happening. We can close the poll, I think. We're okay, excellent. One of the things I think is important is, as we look at what's happened over these last 14 months, we're seeing definite trends and some realities and some direction that is happening because of this, and really tipping things in a new and different direction. One of the fun questions I have, especially for salespeople, is, let me get this so it works, there we go, is are you still waiting for selling to return to the good old days with what's happening? I can put myself in that guy's position if you like. But this idea of, are you still waiting for things to return? Because one of the things that rather amazes me is I talk to experienced, successful salespeople. A lot of them are just kind of, they viewed this last year as just somebody hit the pause button. And as soon as things starts to open up and we unclick the pause button, they're assuming things are going to take off and we're going to be exactly back to everything was beforehand. And my concern is, I don't think that's going to happen. But the reason is for some very specific reasons I'd like to share with you. I just don't want to make the statement, it's not going back. That's just too much theory. What I'd like to do is identify at least why I am saying that and what I see happening. Because what I watch happen is that there is a reality of selling that about every 10 years, what gives you a competitive advantage has dramatically changed since as far back as the 1960s that I've been tracking this. See, in the 1960s, success in selling came from your ability to demo a product, but that stopped working. So in the 1970s, everybody shifted to the high pressure selling. If you went through sales training in the 1970s, you were taught all the closing techniques and all the kind of slimy techniques of selling. The Ben Franklin close, the alternative choice close, the puppy dog close, the full body slam close, the bird dog close, all of these different very specific steps with the idea that this would put extra pressure on a customer to tip them into saying yes. That's where all the high pressure, and frankly, we got a lot of bad raps as salespeople came from the 1970s. So in the 80s, things went to consultative selling, relationship selling. So, okay, no more pressure, no more hassles, let's be friends. So in the 1980s, relationship selling was the dominant competitive advantage. Who could be the biggest friend of a customer gave you the edge. Then the 90s hit and that shifted because relationships weren't working to give you any advantage anymore. We were giving a bunch of free tickets and alcohol away to people, but it wasn't really giving us that much of a competitive edge. In the 90s, it shifted to consultative selling. Friends don't buy from friends, friends buy from experts. And then in 2000, it became one of basically negotiated partnerships because we were giving everything away for free in the 90s and customers are taking advantage and it wasn't giving us a buying decision. So it became more of a negotiated, I'll do that free work for you, but give me some kind of commitment that if you don't buy from me, I still get paid. That was 2000. Then 2010, the Amazon model came in of speed, simplicity, and ease of use. And what we've seen now is this last shift is where the millennial style of buying has taken full power and is right now the dominant force in buying that I see. And the difference is in how millennials look at salespeople and what they expect and want from a salesperson is dramatically different from what the baby boomers wanted and what happened before. And we've just seen because of the aging of all of the generations that right now the millennial buying philosophy tends to be the dominant one. Some of the changes. The reality is COVID has forced buyers and sellers to find new ways to communicate. It's kind of fun watching the Zoom numbers. In December, before the pandemic started, Zoom was averaging 10 million viewers a day on their site, on their platform. In April, as soon as this thing kicked off and started to happen, it went up to 300 million. So our customers learned how to communicate remotely. The online communications, doing seminars like this and doing things on Zoom, it's been around for several years. I've had a lot of my customers that we have been doing this for 3 years or more of training, except that we had to actually teach them how to use Zoom because it was so new. Now, most people have a comfort with it. But because of this, they're finding new ways to communicate. And because of that, I don't think it's ever going to go back because we're now seeing this dominance of what the millennials want from sales organizations and the kind of stuff I watch millennials want. And by the way, this is nothing negative. This is just part of the natural progression that occurs with generational change and the natural progression that every 10 years, what gives you a competitive advantage has been changing. So some of the biggest differences I see is the newer style of selling is millennials. Well, boomers want to communicate by phone. Millennials want to communicate by text. There's more of a distance in the communications. They also today are much more demanding of immediate answers than they ever have been. Boy, even 5 years ago, it was nothing for a customer to call up their salesperson, who was their only point of contact in the company. They would call up their salesperson and say, where's my delivery? Then the salesperson, it might take a couple hours to get that voicemail, would check on it and we get back to the customer. And as long as we got back to them the same day, most customers were impressed with our responsiveness. Today, I watch it's immediate. So if I call up my salesperson to find out where my order is and I get their voicemail, I probably won't leave a message. I'll just then call dispatch. Dispatch can't help me. I'll call the office. I'll ask for their manager. I'll ask for anybody because damn it, I want an answer and I want it now is the reality. So we're seeing much more of a need for a team approach to supporting a customer than it used to be. Because it used to be the only thing we had to focus on was a salesperson. How many of you have salespeople Define the job of a salesperson is to protect my customer from the incompetency of the rest of my organization. And you'd like to put that on a business card, wouldn't you? This was the idea that you were the protector, you were the translator, you were the liaison of doing. So 100% of the stuff went through you. Well, we're seeing that doesn't work anymore. In fact, if you want to test this out, go to any customer and say, an existing customer of yours, and ask them to say, how many different phone numbers do you have for our company in your telephone right now, in your cell phone? And this is a real easy way to delineate where the customers are. Because if it's a baby boomer customer, they're going to say one or two. They have your cell phone number and they have your office number. They might have an internal order desk type of number as well, but that's about it. But if you ask a millennial, they'll have the phone number of everybody that's contacted them. If you have a driver show up with a delivery that's coming from your place, they'll go to that driver and say, give me your cell phone number in case they need to get in touch with you in the future. This total connectivity. So when they want an answer, they'll go to the network to ask for the answer, not just their salesperson. So it's requiring us to have more of our team aware of everything that's happening, because we don't know who the customer is going to reach out to demanding an answer or response to where their concern or problem is. The other thing that's happening is I watched that buyers, this is a millennial philosophy. Millennials watched growing up their parents getting beat up by salespeople. So most millennials don't have a real positive view of selling. Look how few business cards you see today, period. But look how little you see people showing their title of being sales representative or marketing representative. People don't want those titles anymore because it's not a positive viewed by a lot of people. Buyers today don't want to be sold. They just want to buy. So because of that, that's causing some real connectivity issues. One of the things that's happening is attention spans are getting shorter. We have less time to sell and we're being brought in later in the process. This is a critical issue. And I apologize. I forget if we talked about this in August, but this is the difference. 10 years ago, if you and your family, the example I like to use, you and your family decide you want to buy a hot tub. 10 years ago, what would you have done? You've gone to a hot tub store, stopped on the way home from work, picked up some literature to ask questions, learned what your options were, or learned what you ought to be careful about. Then you went home and talked to your family, and as a family, you made a decision. But that was back then. What would you do today? If you and your family decide you want to buy a hot tub, what would you do? Well, this is where we see the difference in the generations. If you're old, you've said you Google it. You'll go and do a search on hot tubs and try to find out everything you can. But if you're younger, more in the millennial or younger than that, you're going to ask your friends. The important thing is you're likely not going to have your first contact be to ask a salesperson. When I've asked people, why are you doing that? Why are you waiting so long to talk to a salesperson? They usually say, well, we want to make sure we're not taken advantage of. We want to make sure we know what our options are before we talk to somebody that's going to try to push us. I've watched this. I do a lot of work with the John Deere organization with some of their dealers. And we did training work on how do you sell riding lawnmowers one year. And we found out in doing our research that over 50% of the people coming in the spring to buy a riding lawnmower from a John Deere dealer, fine organization, great equipment. But you're talking about $1,000 or more for a riding lawnmower. Over half the people coming in the spring to buy one brought a printout with them. They'd already gone online and configured what piece of equipment they needed, what features they were interested in buying, and even had an approximate price they assumed they were going to be paying. What was fascinating was over half the people that did bring a printout in had configured absolutely the wrong piece of equipment because they didn't know what they were doing. The problem so we have in selling is not only today do we have to lower customers' resistance and get their attention and discover what's going on, but we also have to discover where they are in their buying process, because a lot of the times they might be halfway through what would have been a traditional selling process you would have gotten involved in. They're already halfway through it and they made a lot of decisions that you might want to know about. So a major change we're seeing is reps are being brought in later, and a lot of times in their sales calls, they're having to catch up. The second thing we're seeing is calls are actually shorter. Customers have less patience. You don't see the relationship selling pressures like the old days where they're just not interested in just sitting around and having chit chat. And just the fact of you reactively supporting a customer is no longer as effective. Because it used to be, boy, the average salesperson would go in and only ask an existing customer 4 questions on every call. Anything you need? Anything coming up? Anything I can help with? And how's the family? This reactive, I joke and call it the 3 steps of selling: show up, suck up, and pucker up, kind of reactive selling approach. I'm finding that's not as valuable to the customers. They're expecting and wanting you to bring more proactive things, more proactive solutions. And so because of that, we have to keep reminding our customers there's less loyalty today. We have to keep reminding them on what our added values, our offerings, our extra support, why they want to buy from us, because we don't have the loyalty today that we used to have 10 or 20 years ago. Now, these are the changes I watch happening because of all the impacts. And I believe these have been impacted because of this natural and positive evolution and generational bias of how we buy. Not that much about the COVID having impact on it, especially now as things are opening up again. So now the question is, how are you going to be communicating with your customers now that we're in this new arena or this new world post-COVID of how customers want to buy and how we can best support them? There's been some other changes I watch and where customers' attention span and interest is. See, one of the ways we can look at your selling skills and you and your company, where are your skills of selling, is to ask, what are you doing to rebuild your time and rebuild your business into this new growth opportunity that we see happening the next couple of years? And what I watch happen is each business and each salesperson tends to be a little bit out of balance. The question is, how in balance are you with this? Because there are three separate skill sets that are needed for success in selling and impacting your customers. The first skill set is your technical knowledge. You understand plastics, you understand materials, you understand applications, you understand UV rays and the impact on anything you do. You see all these components of what it is you're selling. You can answer all the customers' technical questions and help them in how they apply it. That's one strong area of selling. You being an expert, critical to selling. The second critical component is you have the business and financial skills. So if a customer says to you, gee, you're the most expensive vendor we're talking to today, why are you so expensive? That you could show them on paper why, even though you are a higher price, there's savings they're going to get from you, lower risk they're going to get from you, ease of use they're going to get from you, that they wouldn't get from a competitor, so that you can ultimately show the customer that even though you are a higher price, you're a lower total cost. And by looking at that lower total cost, you can show them why financially spending just a little bit more money is actually going to save them in the long run. That's that business and financial side. You understand how and why the customer makes money and how to apply what you sell to show them how you can improve their profitability, how you can lower their risk, how you can make their life easier, or how you can even increase their profitability or competitive advantage. These are the drivers of buying today. So the question becomes, how effective are you in communicating to that business and financial side of the customer's business? And then the third area is your selling, your promoting, your marketing, your relationship building, being their friend so that they trust you, so that you can give them advice and help them improve their business. Now, to be successful in sales in any industry, we need to be mastering all three corners of the triangle, don't we? The problem I watch, though, is in most sales organizations, the sales teams embrace one area, tolerate a second area, and then completely ignore the third. I see it in a lot of equipment sales. In the old days, equipment sales was sold by relationships. So if you were a technical expert and you were the friend of the customer, that gave you a competitive advantage. The problem is, as customers are wising up and becoming more business focused, there's a lot of customers that will say to a sales rep, okay, this is a $100,000 purchase. You're $8,000 higher than anybody else. And they hand you a blank sheet of paper and say, show me on math, how I'm going to get my 8,000 back, or else I can't buy from you. Most sales reps today are kind of frozen by that kind of pressure because they don't have the math. They can talk their philosophies. We're higher quality. We're going to take care of you. We're more supporting. We have more resources, all these vague answers, but they can't pick up the pen and show the customer how they're going to save $8,000 or more buying from you. Where are you with all these skills? As we look at this, where are you strongest as a salesperson? Where is your company put the most attention? And if anything, what areas, if we put more attention on, could actually help increase your competitive edge more than what you're working on right now? This is the difference between amateurs and professionals. Amateurs tend to only work on what they do best to try to do it better. But professionals look at what are they doing that's weakest or what they're doing worst and look to improve that. So what they already do best comes across as even better. So are you approaching this as an amateur or professional? An amateur says, hey, selling is my strength and my technical skills. So let's have some more technical training and let's work at building relationships with customers and we'll be right back to normal. Here's the difference. I see in the past, effectiveness in selling was based on the primary focus of most sales reps was going in with their selling, promoting, relationship building, becoming the customer's friend and really understanding what they need and asking a lot of questions. There was a secondary importance in the technical expertise and the technical support to be able to help a customer through these processes. And a lot of the business and financial in a lot of cases was either ignored or sure didn't get a lot of attention. The difference I see today is how this is changing, where I'm seeing, especially under more of the millennial bias, that they don't want to be your best friend anymore like the baby boomers did. They want to have a relationship, but they want to be friends. All of these skills are still important. It's just, where do you gain a competitive edge? Where's your competitive advantage going to come from? And so today I watched that the primary focus of customers' expectations from their sales reps are that one, technical expertise, you're going to help improve my business technically. And you understand the financials of what I have to deal with and how we make money and what we need. Where the relationship, the friendship, take me out to dinner, take me out to lunch, let's be friends, is becoming a much more secondary kind of position. We're right on time with where we need to be, but this is a great time. I've stopped for a minute. Let's first ask Curran, are there any questions that have come in? I don't see any in the chat room. Or if anybody else has a question, you can just turn your mic on and ask and let's talk about it. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, so as Jim just said, we're taking a few moments to answer some questions. You can put them in the chat box or you can private message them to me and we'll relay them right over to him. And if we don't get to your question now, we'll be sure to answer it during our second Q&A towards the end of the program, or as Jim said in the beginning, you can contact him directly. So.
Anybody have anything, or should we just keep going?
So Jim, it does look like we, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say, I was just going to joke and say, I've been married a long time, so I'm used to no questions. So it's fine.
No, it does look like we do have a question. So what impact is a sales rep being brought in later in a buyer's buying process having on selling today? And what can we do about it?
To me, that's a great question, because what happens is, if we look at and draw it out as an idea to close process, just a horizontal line, identify on one end and close on the other. What is your process you go through to make a sale? One of the realities is this concern of customers doing more research. We have friends of ours and she needs to have knee replacement surgery because her knees are given out from all the running she's done over her life. And I apologize, this is an old guy story, evidently, about talking about medical. But what's fascinating to me is every time she gets a chance, if anybody mentions that they have had knee replacement surgery, she just interviews them, wants to talk to them, asks them all the questions. What was it like and everything else? But I asked her recently, she still hasn't talked to a doctor. And when I asked, why haven't you gone to a doctor to be examined and talk to the expert that can do the surgery for you? She says, well, I'm not ready yet. I want to make sure that I'm not taken advantage of here. I want to make sure I understand what I'm getting into before I start talking to them, because once I start talking to them, things are going to happen too fast. How many of your buyers have that attitude about everything they're buying today? Because it used to be in the old days, if I'm thinking I needed something, I would call the sales rep in and say, I think I need this, tell me about it and tell me why. Would listen to the presentation, take the documentation, the literature, and then would go from there. Look how today, there's a good chance when you're brought into a process, you're brought into the middle of it, that they've already done a lot of work. Problem is, we don't know it. And if you don't ask, you're never going to know. So one of the first questions I'm seeing we have to add to our selling process today, when the customer says, this is my interest, this is what we need, this is what I want to talk to you about. When they do have that contact, one of the first questions has to be today, we can't assume they're at the beginning. So one of the best opening questions is, so I'm sure you have been doing some research on this. Walk me through what you've discovered so far. And have you made any decisions yet? Or do you see any things that you think are the solutions you are most excited about? We have to poll the customer on this to find out Because I think in a lot of cases, you're going to be surprised and they're going to say, oh, yes, we've done this, or we checked this out, or we talked to these people, and that they've done a lot of this because this is what's naturally happening. The other problem we have to have is there's an assumption when customers bring you in later in the process that they assume they're only talking to you now as an order taker, not as a problem solver, not as a consultant, not as a trusted advisor, but as an order taker, an order fulfiller. So they see you more as a waiter ready for them to place their order off the menu than they are having to listen to you based on what you suggest they might want to order. So because of that, also, we have to be careful that we understand that there could be some very strong competitive pressures, more than in the past, to even identify. So what else have you seen? What have you liked so far? What's really got your attention? Have to be this qualifying questions of just where they are in the process, not just the qualifying questions of what are their needs and what do they need to do about it. It's a changing process. I hope that the rest of you are seeing these same changes I am, because this is what I've noticed happening across most businesses, especially in distribution and supplies being sold. Any other questions, or should we jump into it?
It does look like Jake has asked a couple of questions in that chat box right there.
Yeah, I can see that here. And the questions about how we get the information spread across the organization. Well, the easy answer is that's what your CRM system's supposed to do. The hard answer is most salespeople aren't using CRM system their company has, or don't really want to put all the information in because they feel they're losing power by giving up all their connection information. So in a lot of organizations, it's a challenge that we can't get the information to others. What it also takes is proactive briefing. There's three things that need to change to make this stronger. The first is there needs to be more consistent messaging being delivered by the sales reps when they do go to sell. The problem, we're going to talk about it in just a moment, of why, based on all the options, do I want to buy from you? The problem in most organizations is every sales rep is delivering a completely different answer to that question than any of their peers are. So every salesperson is basically selling a completely unique company to what their peers are. So there's no consistency. So that puts your service and support people in a very reactive position of not even being able to offer the customer ideas because they're not even sure why they're buying, because every customer's been buying for a different reason that they've talked to. So the first thing is we need to have more consistency of selling our values and our solutions and our proposition of how we can help you. The second thing we need to do when we get an account is we then need to brief the people that are going to be involved to prepare them for what is the uniqueness of this account, or what are the customer's expectations, and what are the customer's challenges that we're trying to help them with. And then the third thing is we just have to keep monitoring that to make sure we understand where they are with this, and that we're giving them what they need, and that we are synchronized with the direction they're actually wanting to go. Customers are taking more control of their buying process than ever before. So we have to be careful that everybody in the team understands what the process is and how we need to address it. Let's see if that, hopefully that answered that. And what's the best way to make calls more effective, productive, and informative, given sales calls are given very little time for buyers today? These are great questions you're asking, so please keep them up. This is where the steps of a sales call come in. If you want to be more effective on a sales call, and the sales call is shortening, then you have to have better structures to be able to take advantage and be effective within that shorter time frame. I think it was Winston Churchill, after his career, and he was giving speeches in England, programs he was doing. He was a keynote speaker for a while. And he used to joke that said that a half-hour speech is twice as expensive as a 1-hour talk. So he said in 1 hour, you got all the time to figure out what to say and actually get it said. But if you only got a half hour, you better know what you're going to say before you say it, or you won't have time. I think the same thing's happening in selling. How are you going through the steps of a sales call? 5 steps I teach are: first, you lower resistance, then you ask questions, then you present, then you have some kind of closure questioning or commitment questioning. And then the 5th and final step is agreeing and setting up our next contact. So part of it is even laying out the call, saying, if we only have 10 minutes, how do we make sure we don't waste 8 of those 10 minutes just on chit chat and rapport building, that we can accelerate the first part to get to what we really need, because we know we only have so much time and we know the structures we have to follow. The best way to gain more control of your sales calls is to gain more control of your understanding and usage and awareness of the steps of a sales call, because that gives you control. We see this in golf, that the professionals are so competent in their swing And they know the steps so exactly that even if they have to adjust for really weird situations like hitting the ball when it's behind a tree or something else, they can still do it and have a great shot because they know the steps they have to go through, so they know what to adjust. They're not trying to whack it harder. The idea, they have more control. So one of the best things we need to do is, how are you as a salesperson gaining more control, since we are on such shortened time frames and they're talking to so many people? All great questions. Let's see, is there anything else? Or are we okay to, looks like we've answered everything so far. Curran, anything else you think? Or are we?
I think we're good to move on and continue.
That's it. Jim, damn it, move on. Okay. We can make this happen. So let's talk about it. I have some suggestions for you and recommendations that I would like to offer of what I think you can do to be more effective. With this, how do we reach our communications? We spent the first half really talking about what all the challenges are about this. Now, what do you do about it? Well, the first recommendation to selling success today, I believe, is to strengthen your technical and business skills. Now, I'm sure for most of you, you have this under control, but we've got to make sure that we have complete coverage of this, because the reality is, a lot of cases, customers have already done research on what they're looking at. So a lot of times we're seeing that these buyers are asking a lot more detailed technical questions than they ever have in the past, because they've done so much work before they actually talk to you and to understand what was being said with it. That's at least the foundation. The second recommendation or suggestion is to look at how you strengthen your message of uniqueness and value. Because if we have shorter sales calls, we need to position and own the position a lot sooner. Look at some of these variety shows that are so popular on TV. I know America's Got Talent is about to start up. You have The Voice. There's a dancing one. If you notice in all of those, as viewers, you decide in the first 10 seconds if you think that person's any good or not, and if you want to pay attention or go get a soft drink. So it's all, if we look at, if you're going to be performing on America's Got Talent, if you can't get their attention in the first 10 seconds, there's nothing that's going to happen. Well, frankly, I think that kind of same process and philosophies exist in selling. What's your 1-minute message? Because as you start to talk to a customer and say, by the way, it might help to understand our approach or philosophy that we see how we could be of most help to you is, and then you give this 1-minute answer. Can't be more than 1 minute to be able to answer the customer and show them what the differentiation is. Because especially when buyers are bringing salespeople later into the process, the later the buyer brings a salesperson in, the more work the buyer has already done, the more they're going to assume that you're just an order fulfiller and it's generic. And it doesn't really matter which of the 4 companies I'm looking at I buy from, because I figured out what I need. I figured out what my problem is. Now I just need a supplier. So I don't need a relationship. I need a supplier. How is your message going to change that or give you more control? And a big part of this is making sure not just you as a salesperson have answers to these questions, but your support team also has the same answers. They don't have to give the exact same presentation like you would. This is not meant to be a sales job for them, but they can at least cover the same major points of what you're talking about. How you can help the customer lower their risk, how you can make their life easier, how you can help increase their profitability or lower their costs by what you offer, and how you can help even increase their competitive edge by helping them develop and have better performing products for their business. This is a critical point that is gaps in most businesses. If you're a manager and you have salespeople, you can test this out by just going around to several different salespeople on your team one-on-one and saying, I was asked this question, what would you say? And what you're going to hear from it is you're going to hear responses that are, everybody's different because everybody's making up their own answers. Because the reality is in most companies, this hasn't been worked on before. See, in the old days, we assumed that everybody was unique. Every sales rep had their own style of selling, and we hired you because you're an experienced rep. So all we had to do is give you technical and product information and pricing information. And we assumed all we had to do was get out of the way and you were going to figure out what to do. So it evolved that each salesperson might do something completely different, but if everybody was making their numbers and their quota and selling okay, management left them alone because there wasn't any need to fix anything. Today, we're seeing much more of a rigidity of a consistency needed to be able to communicate our brand. See, branding is predictability. And if everybody in your company is giving a different answer to this question to a customer, then you have no predictability, which means you really have no brand. So how do we start to communicate the value of our brand, the value of our positioning, not just of PolymerFilms and who they are, but also who you are as a supplier and how you fit into this whole process. This has to be communicated and positioned if we want the strongest case. This is something I would really encourage that you want to work on to do. Because the reality is we have to have stronger control of this, because today you have to have the ability to quantify on paper how and why, even at a higher price, people are going to buy from you. So you deliver your message and set the process up, but then eventually you're going to have to follow that message with quantifying and showing them how you can actually fulfill what you've been promising. Because there's been so many idle promises thrown around that we're going to save you money and our quality is the best, and we have faster production and we have more inventory. Those are being so idly said, even when it's not valid, that just saying that to a customer usually doesn't mean it's going to be trusted. We're going to have to prove it. And part of that proving is, how are you developing your skills, not just to increase your technical and financial information, not just to improve your messaging, the second suggestion, but also how do you improve your ability to quantify and walk a customer through and show them why and how they're a solution. The other thing we're seeing that I think is not going to happen is, if you look before COVID, for most people, the only way they communicated with their customer was by email and by phone. So you'd call and leave a message, you send them an email with a quote attached to it. Usually that was how most of the communication was done. What we've seen though, and especially COVID has pushed this, is we're seeing all the alternative communication sources start to take light. It's fascinating to me how many people I see in directories today for organizations that don't even list their phone number in their directory listing anymore. All they do is list their email, and the assumption is, or their LinkedIn and their Facebook connections, that if you want to communicate to me, you can reach out through one of those vehicles. So what we're seeing is the fundamental reasons of how customers communicate are really starting to change. And the younger the player is at the customer, the more variety and the more different communication tools they're likely to use. I'm amazed that one of my major accounts does not have voicemail on his phone. He said it was taking too much time. He said, if you want me, call me. And if I don't answer the phone, send me a text. That will be sufficient. So the whole selling process we have is mainly my major communication for 90% of what I do. And they're a good customer, and that we're doing a lot of training for them and taking them through a process. But it's kind of amazing that the whole communication structure has been by text. How flexible are you? Because my concern is, I watch a lot of especially senior salespeople make this major error. The customer reaches out by text saying they have a question. How many times have you seen a sales rep pick up the phone and call the customer and leave a voicemail to give them the answer to what they saw in the text? Or the customer sends you a LinkedIn message and you respond by sending them an email message or leaving a phone message. Look how biased so many salespeople are, that they're going to demand, if you want to talk to me, this is how you're going to have to do it. And even though they're the seller, they're making these demands of, you talk to me by telephone or by email, because those are the only tools I'm supporting. What are you doing to expand your flexibility to understand how your customers want to communicate? Because the reality is, you've got the full range. You have some customers are going to say, I don't look at any of that stuff except by voicemail and email. Then that's the case. That's great. Now we know how to reach that customer. But the problem is, especially as you get into their support people might have a completely different bias of how they want to communicate. There's a reality that the younger the person is, the less likely they're going to want to communicate by email and by telephone. Those are just not resources they like. In fact, it's been joked about, the people on Facebook are just old people. If you're young, you're on Instagram. If you're old, you're on Facebook. So we got to find out where our customers are and their support teams to understand how we can best communicate it. And frankly, one of the easiest ways to do this is to just go ask them. How would you like to communicate? What's the best way to reach you? How when you need a fast response, how do you want to reach out, and who are you going to talk to about it? And how can we help support you on this? That we don't force them to try to communicate our way. Second major recommendation of all of this is this is what you might want to do, is just survey your customers. We assume we know how they want to communicate because it's either how we've always done it, or because this is the way we like to do it, or how we're set up to do it, or because we don't understand the other resources. How many of you are not even sure what's happening on LinkedIn and you have no connectivity on it because you didn't think it was important? Not even sure what Instagram is, but you know you're not using it. And the communications assumption, hey, I'll mail you something or I'll fax it to you, or any of that old 1990s language, the customers are going, gee, we wanted to buy something current. So because we're in this officially in this COVID buying phase, we're starting to see right now, markets are starting to open up. Reps are calling more on site, but at the same time, communication structures are being redefined and redirected. So one of the first and opportunity questions with this is, what are you going to do to find out how the customers changed this last year and what you need to do to embrace what they want instead of just trying to push them to maintain what you've had. This is where we're seeing a lot of improvements being done to websites and online ordering, because that's where a lot of more buyers are looking. What I see happening right now is buyers are looking for ways to be faster, more efficient, and more direct in what they're doing. So as part of that, we've got to find out how they want to be contacted and not just how they want to be communicated. The cool thing about the steps of a sales call: first, lower resistance, then you ask questions, then you present, then you close, and then you agree and set up your next contact. The most powerful component of those steps of a sales call is that final step of how we agree and set up our next contact, so we continue our communications and we don't lose the account. So it's even asking them how often they want to be communicated. How often would you like us checking in? We have these ideas we want to bring for you for the year. When would you like us even delaying or talking about those opportunities for you? It's getting this, it's like reassessing the whole situation. In fact, this is a really great time to help you increase your competitive edge. And the way you can do that is to go to your best customers, the ones that are really important to you, and just offer them a day of research, or a half day if it's a smaller account. But the idea is, we would like to research your business. And what you want to do is you want to talk to everybody that touches your products or is involved in the service or the paperwork of what you sell. And we just want to talk to them. How do you want to be contacted? How do you want to be communicated? Help us understand what you want from us and what you believe is going to be the most efficient and effective way to support you. Because we need to show a show of support to say that we know things are changing. Now tell us how you want them changing for you, so that we can mirror that and give you the support you need. Now, this is not reality. This is as much perceptions as anything else. Because I bet if you check within your own company, you've seen several of the suppliers you buy from, they haven't done this. They're either assuming things are going to get back to normal, or assume that you're going to do it the same way we always have. They're going to assume that you'll shout out if you want something different. But they're doing a lot of assumptions there. You have value as a customer to be one of the first to go back and just say, we just want to research as things open up again, to understand how we can best support you, how we can best serve you, and how we can help bring you the most value in a language and in a timing that you're wanting and that you're looking for. This is an opportunity to gain a stronger position within a customer just by going out and using it as an excuse. And by the way, if you do this research, this is a hidden secret opportunity. We've talked about in the past programs that one of the goals of selling is you need to get higher, wider, and deeper within your most accounts, and higher, wider, and deeper than your competition in those accounts. So right now, I find the average salesperson, over half of their customers, they've only got one contact. In fact, there's a great exercise. Take whoever your best company is, your best account that you're working on personally. And if you and I were talking, my first question would be, who is your main contact at that account? Who's buying from you? And you mentioned somebody named George. So the exercise we go through is to say, okay, did you see in this morning paper, George was killed in a car wreck? He's no longer there. What's going to happen to that account? Who else you've been talking to, and who's going to be a backfill for you that you can reach out to now that George has all of a sudden vanished from what's going on? And when I've done that with experienced senior sales pros, I have found for the average salesperson, over 50% of their accounts, they only have one contact. So if that contact is promoted, is fired, it dies, is no longer there, it's like it's a brand new account. We have to go back to the very beginning of trying to sell them because we have no other established connections. One of the reasons in selling we talk about the need to get higher, wider, and deeper is to help you stabilize the account. So you both find out what's going on without the political pressures of what the buyer only wants to tell you. You can find out what's really happening by talking to the frontline people. But that you also have the ability of expanding your connectivity through this research So if something happened to your main contact, you at least have a path back into the company and people that you've already met, identified, and are tracking that you can talk to so you don't lose the account. I hope your percentages aren't that, but the average I've seen across all industries in distribution and equipment sales is about 50% of the accounts. There's only one contact. They're buying from us. They might own the company. They're the decision maker. They have all these values they can say that are positive, but they only have one contact. So if something happens to that contact, we could very well lose the entire account, or it gets opened up to just a general rebidding process. There's another thing I'm watching happening with this changing in communication that's occurring, and that is we're seeing a shift in how customers and approach to selling and buying and how salespeople approach customers. And I apologize with what's all going on in our society today. Talking about a rifle versus a shotgun, I apologize, is a little insensitive, and I've been actively trying to find a different example that still makes the same point. But if you allow me for just a moment, a rifle style of selling was what existed for the last 50 years. And the idea is if you as a company were after this prospect, you would aim your rifle at that prospect, pull the trigger, and a single bullet would come out the salesperson. And the salesperson would do everything with that account. There's a lot of companies that the sales rep is the only person from your organization that the customer's talking to, because the sales rep does everything. It's their total responsibility to handle the account. But what we're seeing is that's not as valued to customers today as is the other option of having much more of a shotgun approach to selling. And a shotgun approach to selling says when you're looking and aiming at that same customer, now we have multiple points of contact that is part of our approach to go out and try to win the business, not just the single bullet of the sales rep. So now the question is, because we have all these options, how are you using the rest of your team to fill it out so you bring a more total solution to your customers? Multiple points of contact and what's happening, not just pulling the trigger and having the one sales rep go out. There's a lot of customers that haven't even talked to any of your management, talked to your suppliers. All they've done is talk to the sales rep and an order entry person, and to them, that represents the company. To do this, they have this more shotgun selling kind of approach. What we need to do is you need to expand your buyer connectivity, the third major recommendation I offer you. And to do that, one of the best ways to do that is to utilize Zoom. And this was one of the conferences I was on recently with some of my friends, and we were doing interviews with some experts for a broadcast we were working on. But the reality of the process is we have this chance that we could reach customers in a much more consistent manner across Zoom. Now, it might be the sales rep, when everything opens up, goes out to the customer and sits there, but then while you're there, they bring it up on the customer's computer, and you bring up a Zoom connection and you bring somebody else in, like a senior manager of your organization or one of your technical people to support this. See, look at what it took beforehand. This is the reality of how Zoom is so powerful for us. If 2 or 3 years ago, you would have said to an account, boy, our president of our company really would like to talk to you and thank you for the business. Could we arrange a Zoom call? There's a good chance the customer would say, what are you, too cheap to get on an airplane and come see me? My business is not important enough for you. And you would likely get pushback of saying, why aren't you coming to me the normal way we buy around here, instead of you trying to do this by a computer call? But what's happened is because this last year plus, everybody has gone on to Zoom. How many of your customers talk about Zoom fatigue? Because they've had so much problem with this and they spend all day on Zoom. They're exhausted by it by the end of the day. But the positive is they're used to the technology. So now bringing somebody into a Zoom call is not considered a negative like it would have been maybe 3 years ago. So that you have the opportunity now that you can bring in some technical experts. You can bring product experts in from PolymerFilms to really help answer the most technical questions a customer has. It allows you to bring in any of your executives or the executives from PolymerFilms to thank a customer personally, even if they're only on the call for 10 minutes. To thank the customer for your business and to tell them how important they are and to listen to what they have to say. Where 3 years ago, that would have been seen as kind of treating me as a second-class customer. Today, it's become very comfortable. The problem is salespeople aren't using this. I'm pushing all of my accounts, all of my customers to do more of getting their senior managers and their technical experts in front of the customers by Zoom And we're having a hard time because they keep going back to this rifle philosophy that we kind of assume the sales rep's going to handle everything. Now, if you decide to do this, I got to warn you, these people are going to need to be coached. As I said earlier, I'm involved in this TV show that we do here in Dallas. My wife produces it, so I've kind of become their technical support. And we're talking to all these national, international experts that are published in all these world events. Their show talks about world events and what's current. And it's amazing how many people we have to coach on what their computer image looks like, how they do this. So if you're going to have an organized call, it has to be organized. One of the problems in selling this rifle mentality is that if a sales rep does take somebody out, like their manager, to a customer, there's a good chance that the sales manager is going to try to sell just like the salesperson is. It reminds me, my grandson, when he was little, 5 years old, he was on 5-year-old soccer. He was in a soccer league. And it was some of the most, if you ever get a chance, it is some of the most hilarious sports you'll ever see. Because at 5 years old, the first year they're allowed to play soccer, at least in the league that our family's in, that the first year they do it, the coaches are allowed on the field to help the players understand what they're supposed to do because they're really learning the game, but they're not allowed to touch the ball. So right before the ball's put in play, we watch the coaches take the kids, kind of like chess pieces, because they're these little 50-pound kids, lifting them up and putting Billy, you're here, and Susie, you're here, and putting all the kids in position. Then when everybody's ready, they throw the ball into the center. And what happens? All the kids come together, and you have this mass of kids and hair going down the field, every once in a while spitting out an injured child. It was just this mass thing. Our goalie scored 2 goals for our team, because when they were at the other end of the field and all their friends with the ball were up on the other end, they couldn't stand it. They kept running up and running through. And they were scoring some stuff because nobody was playing their position. That's what 5-year-old soccer's like. How many sales calls have you been on that, where you and your team are functioning like 5-year-old soccer players? So your sales manager goes in and tries to close the business, or a technical person comes in and takes over the call to try to handle objections. What we have to have is, if you're going to do this kind of team selling, a shotgun approach versus a rifle, you have to do coaching of the players to make sure they only play their position. So the sales rep's the only one selling on that call. The manager's there to affirm the relationship. The technical person there is to answer questions and affirm the technical support, but they're not salespeople. We got to play our positions. And this is one of the biggest reasons I watch a lot of this stuff is collapsed, because anybody that gets in front of a customer wants to throw a punch at them because they assume that's what you're supposed to do in selling. So basically, if we bring 2 others on the call with the sales rep, all 3 of you are trying to punch on the customer instead of let the sales rep ask the push questions and have the others to be support and validation of what's being promised. These are changes I watch happening. This is also a good time. Curran, do we have any more questions?
Yeah, we have a couple of questions that have come through my little inbox here. And if you haven't yet, feel free to put any questions in that chat box or to private message me, and we will definitely get to it. So there is one in the chat box. It looks like it is talking about the importance of internal knowledge of the commercial strategy and basic tools to point towards that objective.
One of the things that comes out of this as a salesperson is you're seeing, because of the impact of COVID, because of the impact of salespeople being brought in later in the buying process, because of the impact of the sales calls being shortened, requires you to be more organized. We already talked about that. But it also requires you to prep others on what is your objective of this call and what will be a successful outcome that you're working towards. What it's requiring us to do is we have to spend more internal time communicating. It used to be that a sales rep didn't really have to tell their company much about their customers because the sales rep was the point of contact. In fact, a lot of companies went to a CRM system just so they could get the names and the phone numbers of the customers who are actually buying from them, because the sales reps really weren't interested in giving that information up. It was part of their power that they have their territory and they own it by having everybody's names, and the main company not having as much connectivity to that. So what we're seeing is it's requiring the need for more structure, more control, more pre-planning, and more communication about what's going to happen. Or otherwise, do you remember the movie Lethal Weapon with Danny Glover and Mel Gibson? They were the 2 cops, And one of the comedic parts of the movie was every time they're in the middle of a gunfire, they're trapped behind a car and they're about to run out into the gunfire. They say, okay, let's go on 3. And then part of the humor of the movie was then they would argue for 2 minutes about whether we say 3 and then go, or that we go on 3. They never had it worked out. And I kept thinking every time I was watching the movie, thinking, my God, that's most sales teams I see. When do you brief your manager when you're taking them out on a sales call? For a lot of companies, they only waited till they actually pulled onto the customer's property to turn to the manager and say, let me tell you about this call. There was little pre-planning done or really any pre-organization. That was normal. How many salespeople have based their career on ready, fire, aim with how they go about it? So if you give me a lead and say, hey, here's an important prospect, I won't do any research on that lead. I'll just go and call them. Let's see where they are. That ready, fire, aim was the normal philosophy of the independent gunfighter salespeople of the past, because they were the only contact with the customer. So they had a lot of flexibility of what they didn't need to have a lot of records. They didn't need to have a lot of structures. They could just be reactively going through their territory. I would hope the point has changed is we can't do that anymore. If you and I are playing chess and I only think 1 move ahead, but you think 2 moves, how many games are you going to win? It's going to be all of them, isn't it? Because you're thinking more moves ahead than I am. So what this is requiring us is we've got to step back and actually have a plan. We can't just decide to do it. We've got to discuss it ahead of time to make sure we're playing. Just like if we were coming to the company picnic and we were signed up together as a 3-legged race, I'm 6'7". I have a feeling that it'd be nice if we could practice that before one of you and me had to run together just to make sure we understood how we were going to do it, how we're going to stabilize each other, instead of showing up and saying, okay, let's strap it on and see what happens. This is the reality of selling. It's requiring more thought, more planning, more focus, more coaching of others of how they can support the team. Look at, in tennis, there's not a lot of plays discussed because there's only one person playing on the court. But if it's a football team or a basketball team, look how much work is done on process, structures, and plans, so that when we go on the court, we're functioning as a single entity, not just as 5 independent shooters. This is the reality of where things are going. And I hope that's one of the key messages you take away of the need to do that. We can't just go in and just have a sales call and say, let's have a sales call and then make it up as we go. That was kind of a long answer, but I know we're out of time as well. Hey, Karen, is there anything else, or we have just a few closing comments?
Yeah, we do have one person who asked if you can give the sales process outline again, just real quickly, if that's possible.
Say that again. Did you say, how do you give a sales call without lying again?
No. If you'll give the sales process outline again.
Oh, okay. The steps to the sales call.
Real
sorry.
fast. You're fine.
Misunderstood. If you look at the steps of a sales call, it doesn't matter if it's a prospect or an existing customer. It doesn't matter where you are in your selling process. Anytime you connect with the customer by email, by telephone, face-to-face, by Zoom, there are 5 steps you need to follow. It's the foundation of all selling. Even if it's a 30-second call, you got to follow the steps to be effective. The first step is to lower resistance. Lower resistance you have, the more people are going to want to talk to you and actually tell you the truth. So the first step is we have to lower resistance. The second step then is we need to ask questions to learn and qualify what they're looking for and understand where they are. So the first step is lower resistance. Second step is to ask questions. Third step is to present your solutions based on what you've learned. This is how we can help you. Once you have completed that presentation, the fourth step then is to have some kind of commitment or to ask for the order. Now, especially when you're selling more of a complex project, it might take you 3 or 6 months to sell this, multiple sales calls, till it might take you 3 to 6 months to get a yes, but we still close by getting commitment. Are we on target with this? Is this getting you the information you needed? Am I helping you? Is this a resource you want to continue checking out? Some kind of commitment to affirm that what you've been doing is okay. That's the fourth step. So we lower resistance, ask questions, present, have some kind of closure. But then the fifth and the final step, frankly, is the most critical. And the fifth and final step is we need to agree and set up our next contact. So I don't care if I ask you about our project. My closing question might be, am I giving you your answers, and is this helping, and are you interested in continuing? Those could be great closing questions. Let's say the customer says yes. Now we want to set up when we're going to get back to lower the resistance even more the next time we go in, because it's a looping process. I end every sales call the same way. I can't help it. It's in my DNA now, that if we're talking, I'll end it by saying, when would you like me to get back to you? Because then if you tell me, oh, give me a call in 2 weeks, when I then go back to the beginning, the lower resistance, and call you in 2 weeks, my opening is, you asked me to give you a call at this time. Is this a convenient time to be talking? Look how you focused I could make that opening, lowering your resistance even more because of how I ended the call. If all I do is end the call by saying, does this look like it's a fit? Is it helping you? Is this relevant? And you say yes, say, okay, I'll get back to you. When you call them back again, all the opening comments have to be I-focused comment. I wanted to check in and see where you were. I wanted to see if you had any questions. I wanted to see if you're ready to talk again. Look how all of those start with I, less persuasive. So if we end the call by getting to agree of when you're going to follow up or call them back, then when you do call them back, it's a much lower resistance, and the process just becomes easier every time you loop through it. First, lower resistance, then you ask questions, then you present, then you close, then you agree and set up your next contact. That doesn't matter if it's 30 seconds, where it's just a quick thing with a customer, or whether it's a 2-hour meeting. The structure stays the same. It's a foundation of selling that we need to get back to. Most salespeople didn't need it before because they had all the time they wanted. Now that we've shortened the selling car like an accordion, the accordion is now much smaller than it used to be. As we tighten this up, we have to gain more control by more consciously thinking of our steps and processes and how we're moving through it. Frankly, I think that's one of the critical issues in selling today, is maintaining that control. Hope that helps as a little mini, 3-minute blast drive-by shooting of the steps of a sales call and why it's important. But what's amazing is senior salespeople didn't need these skills in the past. So as sales calls have gotten shorter and we need more discipline and more control, most experienced sales reps don't have that in their arsenal of what to pull from, because they really haven't been needed to think about the steps. They intuitively followed them, but it wasn't a conscious thought. They kind of let the customer take it where they wanted because they had enough time. Now we don't have enough time. So we have to gain more control and steer our way through it, not just hope the customer helps us through it. Let me wrap it up, because I know I want to respect that we're out of time. There are some resources I want to offer you. We offered them last time, but I would like to at least remind you, they're all free, but available. The first is, I publish 3 videos a week that I post on all the social media platforms. And starting back last March of 2019, and March when all this started, I realized the stuff I was posting was no longer relevant. I needed to start re-recording everything that make it more virus focused. And so we not only did that, but we also created a web page that will direct you to all the videos I posted since all this began, talking about all the changes in selling today. All of the videos are under 4 minutes, and they're on sales ideas and sales leadership, all meant to help a sales leader increase the success of their team. Now, the second thing is, I hope you track on YouTube and on LinkedIn. I've got about 400 videos on YouTube. We have all the current stuff we're also posting. You follow me on LinkedIn or connect with me, and as well as on YouTube, and see what's going on. If you want to make it even easier, sign up for my newsletter. And all you have to do is go to Pancero.com to sign up. It comes out once a week. And all it does is offer the 3 links with the descriptions of what they were about as an easier way to track my videos. We have something new. Very excited. Since we talked last, I now have a podcast, and we're getting several thousand views on this, which is pretty exciting. And the podcast is just the audio version of the videos I've been posting, but they're easier available, and that might be of interest. And you can get to that at podcast.jimpancero.com. The final thing is, I hope that you walk away from this and agree that things are dramatically changing. How buyers want to buy, what they respect in a salesperson, how they want to communicate, how they want to be dealt with, how they want to be supported, what it takes to gain a competitive advantage over your very aggressive competitors today. All of this is going through change. So all these changes happening, the most important question is, what are you going to be willing to change? How much work are you going to put into figuring out how to make this work, and what will work to help increase and maintain your competitive advantage? Because just because you had a competitive advantage before COVID hit does not mean it's going to be the same. It's a restart. And how you position and how you communicate is going to be key contributors to this restart for you. It's an honor to share with you. I'm honored to come back a second time. Hope we get to talk again in the future. Know that if you have any questions about this material, if you call me or email me or text me, I will be honored and happy to answer your questions. I'm very proud of my relationship with Polymer Films and being able to help. So I'll be very happy to be of any assistance to you, even just to answer some questions if that would help. Because you're experienced and you're successful. We know that. So now we know you're good. Now the only question is, are you ready to get even better and to continue to increase your sales even better than what they've been this last year? I apologize, we ran over 10 minutes. Curran, I turn it back over to you. Know that if anybody has any questions, if you reach out, I'd be happy to answer. And most important, thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, Jim. That was great. On behalf of Polymer Films, thank you all for attending. As mentioned in the beginning, we'll be sending you a link to the recording for today's event, in addition to some information on our next webinar. So be on the lookout for all of that. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you at our next program.